Hello and welcome to the LCB Smith Show. My guest today, all the way from Australia, is Fran Sheffield, and the topic is homeopathic treatment for autism. What difference does it make? Our focus is going to be very much on treatment for autism, and I have to say right at the beginning that nothing on this program that gets said here replaces anything that your medical doctor or your general practitioner tells you. This is my view, and these are Fran's views. So, Fran, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Elsaby. Lovely to be here.
How did you get into homeopathy? What is it that triggered your career?
Well, I've always been interested in healthcare, and I have a background in nursing and midwifery, so that was always what I wanted to do, something in that area. And I was actually expecting my first child, so I was coming towards the end of my pregnancy, and I had a few problems. And my husband, of all people, was reading up some antenatal books or mothering books and said, "Oh, it says here that homeopathy can help this." And he's the most unlikely person to do it, but he said, "Look, I'm going to see if there's a homeopath in the area." And fortunately there was, and he booked me in for an appointment with her. So I'd vaguely heard about homeopathy, and I'd vaguely felt that it was a very quaint, old-fashioned sort of thing, but I went off to this homeopath and I had some really good results. And with the birth of my baby, we went back again, and with my second child, I went back. And by this point, I was thinking, this is amazing. I have never seen anything do what this homeopathy does. So I started to study it myself. But it wasn't really until I got into a homeopathic college that I realised the extent of illness and disease that homeopathy can treat. Up until that point, because I'd just been going with simple acute problems, I thought it was just something, home help sort of thing, or coughs, colds, fevers, things like that. When I got into college and I started to realise everything that had been treated, right through history with the master homeopaths, really severe disease and pathology, I went, wow, that's when I was really bitten by the bug. And I've just studied and practised homeopathy ever since.
Okay. So what is homeopathy and how does it heal the body? Right.
Most other systems of medicine treat by actually trying to remove the symptom by opposing it. So say, for example, if somebody had diarrhea, they would give a medicine that would bind up the bowels or create constipation, in the hope if they gave that medicine, it wouldn't cause constipation, but it would stop the diarrhea. And that's how other medical systems work. Homeopathy is very different in that it believes that the symptoms that are being produced, such as diarrhea or the headache or the itchy skin, are part of the overall imbalance, and the body's struggle to correct that imbalance. So if it gives substances or remedies that mimic those symptoms rather than try and suppress them or oppose them, it helps the body with what it's already trying to do, and it intensifies its self-healing efforts, and the body's able to heal itself more quickly. So homeopathic remedies mimic the symptoms that the person's already sick with. So in the case of diarrhea, a homeopath would give a substance that would cause diarrhea in a healthy person. And in giving something that causes diarrhea to somebody who already has diarrhea, it supports the body in what it's already trying to do, and a self-healing effect takes place.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about children and autism.
Yes.
Children can't tell you where the pain is, and with autism there isn't necessarily pain. So how do you identify what it is that you need to treat in them?
Right. So if a parent's bringing a child with or a baby with autism to me, a lot of it is about observation and collecting the symptom totality, as we call it, or a picture of the complete range of symptoms that child has. So during the consultation, I and other homeopaths would be observing, is the child anxious? Is the child running interference and wanting the parent's attention all the time? Does the child avoid total interaction? Does the child avoid eye contact? And not all children with autism do avoid eye contact. So a lot will be coming by observation and how that child's reacting in different situations during the consult. Or if we're doing it by Skype, I'll often be seeing the child on Skype, or I'll be asking the parent, How does your child respond in this situation? What happens here? What happens there? We also look at things such as food likes and dislikes, or foods that aggravate the child, sleep patterns, how they react to things in the environment, such as noise or animals or hot weather, cold weather, whether they sweat easily, sweating patterns, what their basic fears and anxieties are. Are they frightened of thunderstorms or big dogs or being alone? And we put together a symptom picture out of all of that information that comes back in, and then we go looking for a remedy that matches that complete symptom pattern. And that's the remedy that matches the body completely in its imbalance and how the body's trying to correct the imbalance. We give that remedy and it supports the body in its own efforts, intensifies that self-healing effort.
So is that why, well, I don't know if this is true or not, but is that why when you do take a homeopathic remedy, the symptoms get worse before they get better?
Yes, that sometimes happens, but it doesn't have to happen. But it's actually the sign of a very good remedy if your symptoms do worsen. It just means that you've had that first dose of that remedy was a little bit strong for what you needed. So you're not only experiencing your own symptoms, but you're getting some of the mimicking symptoms of the remedy as well added into the picture. So everything seems to double up or worsen for a short period. As the remedy leaves the body, the symptoms settle down again, and then you go on to the improvement. So that's a really interesting thing about homeopathy, in that other medical systems, the remedy or the medicine works wherever it's in the body. With homeopathy, it's as the effects of the remedy leave the body, then you get that self-healing response from the person's own body coming in, and it's the body itself that's creating the improvement. So I'm often telling people, when you're getting better, it's not because the remedy's still there. The remedy's well and truly gone. It's your body's own response to that remedy that's creating the improvement.
You mentioned that the remedy can be too strong. Is that
Yes.
Why would that be?
It depends on the person's sensitivity. Some people are incredibly sensitive to homeopathic remedies. Most people aren't. And that's why it's great to actually start using remedies in liquid preparations rather than pill preparations. But because you can actually dilute it down if the person overreacts or over-responds to the remedy. Yes, it's basically the person's own sensitivity. The other thing that comes into play, the closer the match of the remedy is to the person's symptoms, the more sensitive they are to it, and the more stronger the response will be. So again, sensitivity to a remedy is not such a bad thing. It often indicates a very close match between symptoms and remedy.
Now, with autism in children, from what I've heard, from what I've read, from what people have told me, there is such a variety of symptoms. From turning words the wrong way, to being afraid of noises, to, oh goodness, there's such a long list. Food intolerances, that I think would be fairly easy to treat because it's obvious, but lack of social skills, no sense of danger. The list just goes on and on. What do you treat? Now, you did say that you treat the whole picture, but
yes.
The whole picture surely is different for every person, for every child.
Yes. And this is where the skill of the homeopath comes in. So say, for example, you said a child with no sense of danger. If a parent told me that symptom during a consultation, that's actually not enough for me or another homeopath to prescribe on. We need to know if there's no sense of danger because there's a lot of bravado and overconfidence in the child, whether the child completely lacks some awareness about their environment, so they don't even realise there's danger, or whether they... in the case of injury, they have, some children just don't feel pain when they hurt themselves when they have autism. So therefore, there's no recognition of danger because there's never ever been a sensation of pain previously. So all of those different things will indicate different remedies. So we've got to ask why. And in that case, it makes it easy because we can actually individualise a child. We've got to know why there's no sense of danger, or why the child is frightened of thunderstorms, or why the child avoids looking. For some children, it's a case, again, they're very fogged and they're not even aware another person's there. Another child, it can be, I'm not going to look at you. who are you in my little world? I don't have to answer to you. For another child, they're extremely anxious and frightened, and they'll avoid for that reason. So again, it's finding out why the symptom is there, or why the child is reacting and responding in that way. And those differences, they're the differences that indicate the different remedies.
Now, you treat a lot of children with autism, and I want to ask you this question. Homeopathic remedies are diluted to the point where there's just about nothing, or from what I can gather with some of the remedies, it's not even just about nothing, it's just a mirror image of what you started off with. So how do you know that this actually is effective? I mean, you're treating them with water effectively.
Yeah. Well, firstly, because the person responds to it when we give it to them. And I tell people visiting me, if there's no change within 2 to 3 doses of the remedy, I've got the remedy wrong, contact me. That's how quickly, with, say, a case of autism, we're expecting to see some sort of change. And the frequency of dose can vary with sensitivity, but for people of an average sensitivity, that would be a 2 times a week dose. So parents should be seeing some sort of change by 1.5 weeks. The other reason that we know that the remedy works is because even though it's very potentized and dilute, there's no trace of the original substance, we can actually give that remedy again and again to a healthy person, and after a while they start to exhibit symptoms of that remedy. And that's how we actually test what our remedies treat. We test them on healthy people. We write down the symptoms that they experience under the effects of the remedy. Then we test it out in clinic. When somebody comes in with unwell with that combination of symptoms, if we give the remedy, we get self-healing responses to that remedy. So people say homeopathy, people unfamiliar with homeopathy say homeopathy lacks science, but in actual fact, homeopathy is the most scientific system of medicine, because we're always working with that fundamental law of similars, that what a substance can produce in healthy people, it will treat in sick people. And we test that law again and again in clinic, and it holds true.
Yeah. Well, I can testify to an overdose of homeopathic medicine where a homeopath told me to take a dose 3 times, and I understood 3 times a day, and I took it 3 times a day for a week.
What happened?
The effect was not. Well, my skin actually started peeling off. It was Rastox that I took, and it was not pleasant. She was horrified when I told her what I'd done. So what is it? Yeah.
You had a little proving trial. You would, so if you come across somebody who has peeling skin exactly the same as you had, you'd know, if I give them Rastox, I'll actually help them.
But 1 dose, not just one, and not once a day, just one.
Yeah. And assess what the response is, and some people may need a daily dose, other people may need a dose once a fortnight, depending on their response.
Yeah. So what is the youngest child you've ever treated effectively? Because children can't lie. They can't say that they feel better.
Oh, babies still on the breast, babies not long after birth. But for example, a baby who's refluxy, not taking to the breast, vomits whenever they feed. And in order to prescribe for that child, I'll be looking at, does this child prefer being held? Does this child prefer lying by themselves in a bed? In which case, which position do they seem to be most content in? What do they like with movement? What do they like if you undress them and expose them to the cold air? What do they like if you wrap them up? Do they seem to be alarmed when other people are around, or do they seem to be comforted when there's the presence of other people around? Does the child sweat on the head or back during sleep or when they feed? All of these things indicate remedies, and so we prescribe on that basis. Fortunately, the younger the child, usually we need to draw from a smaller range of remedies. As a person develops and their personality develops and they've met more stresses in their life, the field of remedies that they may need opens up and becomes bigger and bigger. And we've got about, the numbers go up and down, but it's about 3,000, 4,000 homeopathic remedies we can draw from. But as with most things, there's probably about 200 we turn to again and again and again, and they meet 90% of complaints. But with a little baby, you're probably looking at about 20 different remedies initially that are key baby remedies, and we just pick which one according to the symptoms the child's presenting with.
So that's really fascinating. The symptoms you're looking at, it's not only what they display physically and emotionally, but also how they interact with their environment.
Yes, because we're looking when the body's in a state of imbalance. Conventional medicine, for instance, will treat the dermatitis or eczema separately to the migraine and separately to the ingrown toenail, whereas homeopathy understands that those are usually all interconnected and they're not different problems, they're actually all part of one imbalance. So even with homeopathy, you can treat the migraine separately to the ingrown toenail. It tends to be an acute treatment that you need to do again and again. You don't actually get to the bottom of things. Whereas if you combine all of those problems and the related symptoms around them and prescribe a remedy that covers that range of symptoms, you treat much more deeply and everything improves, and you get much more of a curative response rather than just a short-term improvement.
Do you have any theories about what causes autism?
Yes. I'm certainly in the camp that because my own children were affected, that vaccines are a huge contributor, and antibiotics. You get the combination of vaccines, antibiotics, and quite possibly paracetamol or acetaminophen as well, and it just seems to be disastrous for our kids. There are a range of other things too, environmental toxins that seem to be causing problems, but the fact remains, and I see it in my clinic and the limited studies we have on this area, because they make it difficult, if not impossible, to get funding to do them, is that children who haven't been vaccinated are far incredibly less likely to have autism. There's a definite link there with vaccines. I think vaccines overstimulate the immune system. You then start to get a whole range of autoimmune problems coming in, or lowered immunity actually. So then the child goes on and gets ear infections, tonsillitis, things like that. Off to the hospital, you get antibiotics. As soon as you get the antibiotics, you start to disrupt the gut flora. You start to get gut dysbiosis, toxins leaking through leaky gut, then effects on the brain, and it just compounds. There was this, I don't know what's come of it, but there was an observation made that over in Cuba that they had a very similar vaccine schedule to the United States, but they used a different anti-inflammatory for fevers. So rather than using Panadol or acetaminophen, they used their own proprietary product. And they said, so it was said at this time, I don't know whether it's still holding true, that they had very low rates of autism compared to the US, even though there was a similar vaccine schedule in place. So people at that point of time were questioning, could it actually be the paracetamol or acetaminophen causing or contributing to the problem as well? Because the increase in the autism epidemic occurred at the same time. Parents were told to stop using aspirin because of the risk of Rhett's disease and to change over to Panadol. And back then, I don't think it's advice that's being given these days, but parents were told to give the Panadol loading doses on the way before getting the vaccine. So there was Panadol in the system to combat the fever that may follow. And so if Panadol is implicated, so from my perspective, I see those three things as being big contributors. And of course, those are three areas that homeopathy can help with. Homeopathy not only treats it, has preventative effects for epidemic diseases. We've got significant historical and current data on that should be looked at more closely. Homeopathy treats fevers quite nicely, and acute problems that would normally need antibiotics, homeopathy manages those very well as well. And even the childhood diseases, should the child become sick with one of the childhood diseases, homeopathy has numerous remedies that manages the symptoms there very well too. So if homeopathy is more widely known and more widely used, there'd be very little to fear with childhood diseases.
And there's no side effects?
No side effects. Occasionally you'll get that little bit of a worsening or aggravating effect that we spoke about, but that's purely energetic. Yeah. That's not toxic or chemical. That's just the energy from the medicine. As soon as the remedy leaves the system, those symptoms settle down. It's not a poisoning chemical effect. I often tell parents they take away 20 ml bottles of liquid remedy with me and they give drop doses, but I tell them if your child was to swallow the whole of that bottle, it would be quite safe. If you phone up Poisons Information Services, that's what they tell parents too, when sometimes children have got into the remedy bottles or home use kits and so on, and the Poisons Information Services advise parents as well that if it was homeopathy, it's quite safe.
Do you use something like royal jelly in your treatment?
No, I don't. I'm just a homeopath through and through. So I do advise people a little bit on dietary advice, but in terms of a lot of herbal medicines, royal jelly, cannabis oil and so on, they can certainly seem to help and improve symptoms. But from my perspective, it's still not getting deep enough to actually correct the imbalance that's causing the symptoms. It just relieves the symptoms for a period. A little bit as aspirin or Panadol would for a headache. It relieves it for a period. Maybe the child will improve while ever that conventional medicine is in their system. Maybe they won't. As soon as the medicine leaves, the symptoms will come back again. So I tend to just work with homeopathy. And that's not to say that these other things are bad. They're actually much gentler and safer than conventional medicines, toxic medicines, but they may not get deep enough to actually create that or trigger that self-healing response that homeopathy triggers.
I'm glad you mentioned cannabis oil, not just cannabis. My personal view is nothing was ever created for people to smoke. So don't smoke cannabis. Don't smoke cannabis. You were not designed for that. But if you want to try and use cannabis oil, by all means, if that could help for you. Now, we've talked about the children with the autism. I've seen parents where an autistic child really takes a toll on them because it's a 24-hour job. And there's a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of social stigma around this. What can you do for parents to help them cope with the situation they are in?
Well, practically, a lot of parents are doing a lot of ABA, speech therapy, biomedical approaches, going back and cooking from scratch in the kitchen, having to filter out foods. Homeopathic treatment reduces the need for a lot of that. So firstly, financial burden is reduced with homeopathic treatment because the treatment's relatively inexpensive compared to all of these other things that they're having to do. But in terms of parents' emotional state, it places a huge toll on the family, not only the parents but the other siblings who have to make allowances for the child who has autism, their behaviour, for the parents having to spend so much time. So we can improve that child's coping abilities. If, for example, they're inclined to jealousy or resentment or anger or hostility, homeopathy can bring balance back into their lives. So those emotions are more easily processed and managed rather than the child always reacting with hostility or anger or grief that they're not getting as much of the parents' attention. So the parents are often in grief themselves or peddling on all wheels, trying to do everything they can to help their child, or in a state of depression where they've just gone into collapse because it's all overwhelming, everything that you need to do to help this child, unless you just accept my child has autism and you put them in the system and you just let them cope the best they can and develop the best they would without bringing in supportive services. So the parent who's feeling, well, firstly, if we help the child and the child starts sleeping better at night, the parent starts sleeping better. If the child starts to eat a larger range of food where they may be restricting their own food because they're gagging on textures or don't like taste, if we improve that, suddenly meal times become easier for the parents. If the food intolerances are reduced, the child can naturally eat a larger range of food without the abdominal pain, the diarrhea, the constipation. We can help the parent cope with their own grief over the situation or stress or just having so many demands placed on them that they can't meet them all, and so they become irritable or overwhelmed, anxious themselves, what's going to happen to my child? So that homeopathy can help all the way around, not only the child but the parent as well, should they have treatment, or if the child's just having treatment, because there's improvements there, some of the stresses are reducing for the parent.
Indeed. Fran, this has been very, very insightful. I want to tell people about your website, which I'm going to show on the screen now. And I want to do that because I receive your newsletter, which is
Good.
one of the most, well, not one of, but hands down, the most informative newsletter that I've ever received. I really
Thank you.
enjoy it, look forward to reading it all the time. So if people want to contact you for more information, they can do it through the website?
Yes, and there's a newsletter sign-up box there too, so they can get the same newsletter. One thing that they may be interested in is we have a webinar coming up in September. Easy homeopathy, the basics of homeopathy, how to use it in the home for simple self-treatments such as fevers, coughs, colds, diarrheas, insect bites, bashes, bangs, sprains, strains, and also when you need to see a practitioner, what a practitioner can help with. So it covers a lot of information there, so they may be interested in that as well.
Well, I would encourage people to dip their toes into the water with that kind of webinar. Thank you so much. It's been really informative, and I really appreciate your time on this.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm passionate about homeopathy, so it's wonderful to talk about. I hope I haven't talked your ear off.
No, not at all. Thanks, Fran. So we'll meet again next week, same place, same time, with another interesting topic. Thank you and goodbye.